Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Arbuckle, and I'm an analyst at IHS Markit. I don't know if you know IHS Markit. It's really a #1 company in managing data. Its turnover is about $3 billion a year, which gives you some idea of how much data we're actually managing. So I have the unenviable task in my role each year of producing an overview of the embedded industry. Yes, the challenges of building a market report of this industry. Just by comparison, yesterday I had a bit of spare time, and I helped Jerry put together this very impressive board here showing the sponsors for the show. And it reminded me a little bit about putting together an overview for the research, because some of the companies didn't go in very well. They were a little bit stubborn, and when we put the whole thing together, the result was a little bit wobbly, but with a bit of movement at the base and a little bit of tweaking at the top, it seemed to be a bit more robust, or that's what we thought. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you about building a report to sort of give you some idea of what's involved and maybe hopefully build your confidence in some of the results. I'll certainly give you a little bit of a look behind the curtain at the data that we've produced. It's due for publication about late February, March time. So we have preliminary data now. I'd like to use the next couple of days to test some of that data with you, see what your feeling is, see if we can improve a little bit, and go from there. So it's another year on. What's changed in the industry? I'm concentrating here on the VME VPX. I look at other single board computers, standalone boards, and COM, but you know, for the audience today, we're really interested in VME VPX principally. So there's not a huge amount of change. The VME has remained largely similar. There's a bit of a tick up, 2.1% in boards, and where we're really seeing some better growth is in VPX. Maybe not quite as much as some people might have believed there to be, and I'd like to talk about that in more depth later. Certainly, it's of no surprise to anybody that defense is the biggest market for VME VPX. For sure, there's some markets in industrial automation and in the railways too. But by and large, when you're looking at trends, you're really looking at what's happening in the defense industry. When it comes to forecasting the future, based on those figures, this is where it starts to get a little bit more difficult. So how do we do it in practice? We start from that base year data, which we collect from the questionnaire returns that we send out during summertime. And that really gives us a good view of what's being sold product-wise, in which territories, in which industries, the different architectures, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what we need to do is to apply some sort of growth trend looking forward for the next 5 years. And I would best describe that as a kind of a composite forecast. So the most important constituent of that is the actual sort of what we perceive to be the growth of any particular product type, in this case, VME or VPX. So we base that on historical data, and we base it on the views that you as vendors express that you think is going to happen. Now, how do you know the future any better than us? Well, quite clearly, you've got design wins, and those design wins that you have now are going to be the revenue over the next 5 years. So that should give us a very clear idea of where the business is going to go. As well as that, of course, there are other trends that are affecting the amount of money that customers have to spend. And we look at our own data on GDP growth by country by year. We look at industry sector growth. In this case, the most important thing is our Jane's Defense database, but we also have a very good database now on factory automation, so we can apply those factors in a weighted fashion for each of the industry sectors. Then what we do is we test those outputs with you, which is what I'm going to do just now, and hopefully get some feedback over the next couple of days. So in terms of looking at the sales history of the product, I've charted it back to 2010, and you'll see how in the early days of the introduction of VPX, all's looking good, and from where we were in 2010 to now, there's been about a 500% increase in sales of VPX per annum. Sorry, in total over that period. So it goes from about 25 million up to 125 or thereabouts. At the same time, the old venerable standard, VME, has kept going pretty well, just showing a bit of a dip in relation to sort of defense spending over that period. But by and large, has held up perhaps better than some people would have said 5 or 6 years ago. Why is that happening? Well, you know, from what you tell me, you're still getting design wins for VME. You're still introducing new products for VME as well as VPX. So we've got to think, you know, what's going to happen from here on in? The next 5 years, are we still going to see that sort of flat line for VME? Or are we walking towards more of a kind of a cliff face where VPX will suddenly start to swap over and we'll see those lines cross? So the other factors I mentioned, country defense budgets from Jane's. Obviously, the United States is the biggest spender in defense, with over 600 billion US dollars per annum. And the only country that's showing better growth is China, but I guess not many of you are selling defense products into China. India and UK have swapped over, so India is now spending more than the UK is. Another country that's spending a bit more this year, which isn't even on that, but it's Canada. So yeah, that tells us something anyway. So the top 10 countries represent 74% of the global defense budget. So if I'm looking for a trend, I'm going to home in on the United States. I'm thinking about the economy. It seems to be gaining strength. Debt keeps rising, but defense budgets are increasing. The largest defense budget in the world is being maintained, so that's really good news for us. There's some plans to focus more spend on ballistic missile defense, and that's in response to the geopolitical challenges that we all know about. Shipbuilding is getting a bit more funding this year rather than aircraft, but the kind of spending is in terms of readiness, full spectrum readiness, but it'll be a few years before that is entirely achieved, so that means quite good growth in defense spending coming up. So where's that money being spent? In the investment part of the defense budget is really the green and the gray bars in there, and you'll see how that's dipped down from 2011 down to 2014 was the lowest spending, but that's gone up 2015, 2016, 17, 18. 18 is going to be about the peak in defense spending. So you've got both procurement and you've got the research, development, test, and evaluation in those two bars. So that investment is about 31.7% of the whole defense budget. How that breaks down in terms of mission category, I won't dwell on that, but it hasn't changed a huge degree since last year, just a bit more on shipbuilding than aircraft. But what you'll see is cyber is increasing in spending. That's the yellow box you see there. That's 8 billion. And that goes throughout all the different slices of the pie, so it's shown as separate. So with all that information together, we come up with a forecast of both boards and systems. And I've been a bit harsh, perhaps, on VME, and I'd like your feedback on that when we talk. I've kind of assumed there's going to be a fall-off in VME, although it's not immediately apparent, of about 12% a year is what I put in there. That might be a bit harsh. Meanwhile, VPX is increasing, and you'll see that the systems business is probably going to increase faster as users want you to do more integration and solve that problem for them. So overall, the forecast for Vita boards and systems, VME is aging well, VPX is doing well, but seems a long way from overhauling VME. The sales are dominated by the defense market, so growth is largely supported or constrained, if you like, by that budget. We've got some niche applications, but they're small. And just remember, the forecast is just one scenario. And it's the data that we've got at hand at the moment. So we can produce other forecasts. And certainly we need to review it annually. So the XDCA market dropped off. Security, big issue. You see DARPA spending now. We've got flaws in processors, and we've got new disruptive technologies coming in. The unknown unknowns are always the challenge. So it's really over to you. What's your view? Like to hear those. Any questions right now?